So we're looking at chapter 7 and want to jump right into this. We're dealing with the Sermon on the Mount. We've been doing an overall view of the Sermon on the Mount, and we've divided it into 3 sections, obviously. And each section, of course, is essential to the next section. So the understanding of one builds into the understanding of the other, so you can't just run into the middle of it. So I need to walk you through the 2 sections that we've gone through as we've dealt with chapter 5 and then chapter 6 last week, and now entering into chapter 7. We've tried to select specific words which somehow highlight what is contained within and the emphasis on the focus of the particular section. And the first section we're calling Present Reality of the Kingdom, which is chapter 5. It contains, of course, the Beatitudes and all that spills out of that. And it really is the fundamental premise of the entire Sermon on the Mount. It was this premise which got the reaction at the end of chapter 7, where it says the people in verse 28, chapter 7, the people were astonished, which literally means knocked out of their senses. So what Jesus was saying was so phenomenal. It wasn't the method of his speaking. It wasn't the mannerisms of his speaking. It was the truth he was speaking was so overwhelming, it knocked them out of their senses. And you get that from the very first words that are taking place in chapter 5. And the reason it was so astounding is because he was presenting to them not unlike anything that they had ever heard. Remember, they're Jews, but even if they hadn't been, it still would have taken place, because the world only has known one kind of idea, and that is that there is a moral system, there is a fairness we talked about in Sunday school class, there is a righteousness that seems to permeate the entirety of every culture. There is a moral system that's established, and what you do is you're walking on the road of that moral system, and you, of course, have to discipline yourself, and you get better as you go along. And if your parents beat you, that helps, so keep beating parents. You just keep in this, you just keep doing this, and you keep struggling, and you keep trying, and you keep developing, and the further you go and the better you get, the closer you get to the goal of the moral system. Jesus comes along, and instead of giving you a road to travel, discipline, try, work towards, and arrive at, he starts at the beginning and says, "Oh, you're already there. Congratulations." Which is mind-boggling, folks. You're already in the kingdom. That the kingdom of God is not something you're working towards and making your way to. Keep struggling, keep trying, keep coming to church, keep giving that money. See, it's not, no, congratulations, you're already there. Oh. Which is the whole beatitude thing. And you say, well, how could that possibly be? How could we already be there? That's ridiculous, because we haven't arrived. I don't feel I've arrived. Do you feel you have arrived? I haven't arrived. He says, you don't understand what I'm talking about. And he moves you into verse 17. He has fulfilled the law. He didn't come to destroy the moral structure. He didn't come to destroy the moral system, the code. He came to fulfill it, which means he sucked it into himself. And in relationship with him, it all finds itself fulfilled in you. So the reason you have arrived is because, you've embraced him. And in embracing him, all of this takes place in your life. So the whole key of the kingdom is not some moral system. The whole key to the kingdom is the wonder of his person and embracing him. So the overwhelming of need of your life is not to try harder, work harder, struggle more. Embrace him more. Seek him. Come after him. Crave him. Hunger and thirst for righteousness, which is him. He is the deal. So it's all about intimacy in him. He has fulfilled the law. And we describe that fulfilling as the alphabet. You learned the alphabet, but now you don't think about the alphabet because you have come into reading the purpose of the alphabet is it's important, it's necessary, but don't sing the alphabet song to me. We've moved beyond the alphabet into the actual reading, and it's forgotten. Although it's all there, because it's been fulfilled into the higher. Jesus is the higher, and the whole law has been sucked into him, and it's all in him, so he's all you need. And he develops that all the way through chapter 5. So the premise is not work hard, earn, get, arrive at. It's, I'm giving you the kingdom. It's a state of being. So you are salt, state of being. You are light, state of being. You are this. Why? Because you are in relationship with me. Then he moves us to chapter 6. In chapter 6, we're titling this the progressive relationship, because he says, how does that play out? Okay, that's all great concept, great idea, but in reality, in everyday life experience, how does that literally work itself into all of my relationships? And he begins to investigate that in chapter 6, which of course is the heart of the Sermon on the Mount, that chapter. The practical outspill. And it's interesting, he says, I want to talk about all areas of life. And you say, well, no, he doesn't. He talks about 3 areas of life: charitable deeds, prayer, and fasting. Which, when you go to every world religion, are the heart of and emphasized in every world religion. Charitable deeds, prayer, and fasting. But when you really get into it, you discover that charitable deeds are all about materialism. Your materialism. Prayer is all about your relationship with God. Fasting is all about the relationship of the physical with the spiritual. And when you think about it, every single arena, area, aspect of your life fits into one of those categories. Materialism, relationship with God, physical relationship with the spiritual. Every aspect of your life fits into one of those categories. So in these 3 simple presentations, he's literally covered the entirety of your life. And he gives you not emphasis. He's not establishing, here's how you're to do charitable deeds, 1, 2, 3. No, that's the moral code. He's not giving you, here's how you ought to pray. At the end of your prayer, always say, in my name, in the name of Jesus. He doesn't give that, because this is not technique that he's teaching. See, he's already given us chapter 5, which is, hey, the law and the moral code has been sucked into me. So this is all about embracing me and allowing that embrace to practically spill out into your materialism, into your relationship with God, into your relationship physical with the relationship with the spiritual. Let it spill into those areas. Well, what would that look like? He thunders to the end of that chapter saying, seek first the kingdom. That's the way it looks. That in all these areas, you've got one thing on your mind. Me, he says. So if in your materialism you got one thing on your mind, him, what does that do to your charitable deeds and your approach to materialism? Materialism no longer dominates you. It's no longer the thing. It doesn't dictate your life. It isn't the barometer by which you measure things anymore. Why? Because he is that. And he promises, if you will do that, you know what will happen? All these things will be added to you. Your relationship with God. Do you have one? How do you get one? Oh, did I do enough? Is God watching? Oh my. He says, no, don't focus on that. Focus on me. And in focus on me, guess what? You experience all there is of God. So in the focus on the person of Jesus, you know the Father in such intimacy. Well, what about prayer? Well, if you got the particulars, methods down, see, he wasn't proposing methodology. He's enter into your closet and pray. He wasn't proposing that I'll only hear praise that come from a closet. See, that's back to the moral code. He was saying, don't let your motive be parading yourself and rewards from out here. No, let your motive be seeking him, and in seeking him, and after him, it all comes about. A fasting. Wash your face. Why? Because this is not about techniques, see? This is about relationship of the physical with the spiritual. And if you focus on him, all of that begins to take place. Well, what about demons? I wouldn't worry about them. I'd worry about seeking Jesus, and I think he'll take care of them.
That's right. Amen.
And sometimes we've gotten so far off that we knew more about demons than we knew about Jesus, and wonder why they possessed us. See, I think the whole deal is all wrapped up in Jesus, and everything else begins to come into its slot, and it's all taken care of. Why? Because I'm focused on his person, which is why we talk about practicing his presence, and living in his presence, and day in and day out, hungering and thirsting. So you get the whole flow of this. So this is not a moral code then arriving at. This is, whoa, you're there. Why? Because it's all fulfilled in him. He is the kingdom, so I'm embracing him, so I'm there. Well, how's this going to spill out of my life? Oh, I'm going to focus everything on him, seeking him first, and then all this stuff will be added. Well, I got a marriage problem. Seek him first, and all this will be added. What about my lust and my thought process and my body drives? Oh, if you seek him first, all this will be added. So the answer comes back to what? Him. Perhaps you're thinking, I wish you'd preach something else sometime. Well, I don't know what to tell you, folks. Because everywhere you go in the scriptures, you come back to, he's it. Now, if you want me to add on, I've told you this before, I'd be glad to add some things on. It's Jesus plus giving me $50. See, I'd be glad to add that on. There's no problem with that. I mean, I'd be glad to tack that on if it'll help you. Whatever helps you, I want to do. But really, when it comes down to it, it's just Jesus. See, he's the total deal. Now, that brings us to chapter 7. Now, if you comprehend chapter 5, you comprehend chapter 6, then you can move into this final chapter. Verse 1. Judge not. I don't like it already. Because I'm really good. There's something I'm good at. I finally find one good thing in my life that I can really do well, and brother. Judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but you do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? Talk about a sense of humor. That's a joke, isn't it? Hypocrite! First remove the plank from your own eye. Then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under your feet and turn and tear you in pieces. Ask, and it will be given you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. Or what man is there among you who, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to to give good gifts to your children, how much more your Father who is in heaven gives good gifts to those who ask him. Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate, difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. We're calling this the permeating reception of the kingdom. Chapter 5, you're not walking a road and arriving, you're there. Why? Because he's fulfilled the moral code and you're embracing him. Since you're in relationship with him, you're already there. So there's no place to go. You've arrived. You're in him. He has fulfilled it all. Chapter 6, how does this play out practically? Oh, I'm going to take every aspect of my life. I'm going to view it in relationship to him. Materialism, my relationship in religion to God, the physical relationship with the spiritual. I'm going to see everything in relationship to him. As you live in this, let me tell you, there are some pitfalls, dangers, some things that may happen to you. I want to warn you about them. He ends up discussing 4 of these in conclusion. We're only going to do 2, maybe. One is the idea of the statute of the standard, the focus on your fellow man. And he begins with this verse 1. So as you're living in this relationship with Jesus, and you've embraced him, and he lives in you, and he is sourcing you, and in all the fulfillment of the law is now taking place in your life because he has become your nature, as this begins to spill out of you, here is a pitfall that you might run into in your life. Be careful about this. It's slippery. Now remember, he's talking to Jews. The Jewish moral system was very strong, as you know, in the Old Testament. God had given these laws. Then the Pharisees, about 400 years before the time of Christ, came up. They began to develop their group. And all through that 400 years, they developed what they called the oral tradition, which was 613 practical applications of the law of God. In other words, here's the law of God. Well, what does that mean? Here's 613 oral interpretations of what that means. In fact, these are oral interpretations. Law of God is written down. These are oral interpretations. Why? Because we're going to say these so often that you're going to have them memorized. So we don't need to write them down. Which meant I begin to know more about these than I do about this. Did that compute? So the oral interpretations of what the law of God meant becomes more important than the law of God itself. So here's the oral interpretations. The oral interpretations are very strenuous, and I've got them memorized, and I'm working on them, and I'm really doing quite well. Because I've spent a lot of time. 613 takes a lot of time to memorize. So I've really worked on this all my life. Now, as I get older and I've worked on this all of my life, I'm slowly walking up this moral system road, and I'm doing quite well, headed for absolute perfection. Oh, not too far away either. So I'm almost there, and as I get really close, I become comfortable with the law. I become familiar with the law. I know immediately when I'm breaking the law. So I've disciplined my life, got myself shaped up. I'm moving along on this thing, and I look out of the corner of my eye, and I see you. And you're a mess compared to me. Because you haven't worked as hard as I've worked. See, you only memorized 248. I memorized 613. So I'm far advanced above you, and I'm looking out of the corner of my eye, and I compare myself. Automatically, I compare myself with you. And I have a right to do that, because I've worked harder than you have. I've come to church more than you have. I can arm wrestle you theology, which you don't even know. See, I'm far advanced compared to you. So I'm able to look down on you. I'm able to, you don't line up. You shouldn't have. I'm able to come to you and give you instructions. Where does all that come from? Oh, I'm walking this road, wanting to arrive here. I've struggled, tried. It sets up judgment, makes us competitors, and I really like it. And one reason I like it so well is because when I compare myself to you, I am phenomenal. And I can always find someone who isn't as good as I am, which makes me feel good. So I can walk around the church, my job, my home. It's a natural. Do you see that? The very moral system of arrival, do this, don't do that, performance-oriented, it's natural to judge. Well, I know I'm not supposed to judge. Well, get it under control. Okay, that's a part of the moral system. If you could get that conquered, you would really be up. But even that becomes a disaster because you judge those who judge. Well, they're judging. So I'm judging a judge. See how tricky this whole thing is? And it all comes from this thought process that has permeated our whole world of this road thing and coming to the arrival. Jesus comes along and says, hey, let me tell you, you're already there. Oh, so you're not in competition with anybody. Wow, isn't that that's a mind boggler. That's a knock me out of my senses kind of thing. That I'm not in competition with you, and I'm not compared to you, and I'm not, whoa. So the whole judgment thing all of a sudden is ridiculous. If I continually focus on him, how can I tell if I'm really focused on Jesus? How much judgment of others is in your life? For every moment of judgment of somebody else in your life, every word of criticism of someone else in your life, every moment of comparing, of looking at them and saying, immediately tells you that's a moment you're not focused on him. This is really strong, isn't it? Because you cannot be focused on him and judge others. Now, the moral system, follow this through, the moral road, discipline yourself, get your act together. Maybe sometime you'll arrive. I look out of the corner of my eye. I see you. I'm much better than you are. I compare myself to you. I can judge easily because I can always find someone worse than I am. That develops an elite system, an elite group, because the only ones I really want in my church are those who have arrived to my level. Can I be a part of your church? No. Why? You don't. See, when we put in these doors here, we had windows, as you know, there, and we were putting these doors in. I thought about making them this would be called the thin church. We would also inspect your eyeballs when you came in, because this would be the blue-eyed thin church. I like it. And we would all have services that would just praise thinness and blue eyes. Because that's where I am. I fit into that group. See, I like that because I don't struggle with having blue eyes. And I've mastered the thinness, even though I struggle with fat. And I've mastered that one. Oh, feel good. So I can readily criticize everybody about the things that don't bother me. That makes sense? And the things I judge in others the most are the things that I'm not bothered with or have mastered. So we begin to talk just about the things that don't bother us, which is exactly what the Pharisees did. You've seen it. A preacher who's far overweight criticizing those who smoke. And I want to stand up and say, what? How can you? This is not going too well, is it? See, the guy who rents movies and takes them home and watches them criticizes the guy who spends time at the theater. Because he never goes to the theater, so it doesn't bother him. The guy who's been baptized once backwards criticizes the guy who's been baptized two forwards. The people who like choruses judge the people who love hymns. Because the people who know choruses are young people and they don't know hymns. Isn't it interesting how this works? Guys like me who don't have a watch, don't wear jewelry except what my wife made me do. Just kidding, I'm privileged. Criticize people who have jewelry. And isn't it interesting? Men set up the standard for the women. Oh, I love it. And we set that whole thing up in the church because it didn't bother us. And we could judge. He says, where did all of that come from? It came from this. I'm telling you, you're already there. Because it's all been sucked into me, and if you would just embrace me, you wouldn't have anything. Think of the time you'd have on your hands if you didn't judge others. And you could spend all that time just seeking me. Now, he goes on in verse 3, that's verse 1 and 2. He goes on in verse 3 to say, if you get into this judging thing, you know what's going to happen to you? It's a pitfall. If you get into this judging thing, you're going to end up being a jerk. And he gives you this picture. This is so phenomenal. I thought about bringing, we got a bunch of railroad ties out in our backyard. I thought about bringing one of those railroad ties. Can you see this guy? He's got this railroad tie hanging out of his eyeball. And of course, he has to hold it because it's so heavy, he has to carry it. Can you see him? He's walking around with this railroad tie. He comes right up to his brother and says, "You got a splinter in your eye." I'd take it out, but I can't get close to you. What a picture. He says, where did that come from? He calls him, "You hypocrite. Why did this happen to you? How did you get this railroad tie in your eyeball? And you're constantly trying to take a splinter. Where did that come from?" It came from the fact that you're on this and you're working and you're struggling and you're striving and you're trying to do right and you find someone else who's less than you are and you got this. He says that's where he says you got to get into this kingdom thing. You got to get into me, man. If you could just embrace me, if you could just let me be your total focus, if you could just let me flow through you, if you could just get intimate with me, do you understand? If you and I could just be one, all of this would begin to solve itself. You wouldn't be in competition with each other. There wouldn't be any railroad tie in your eyeball. So this is not about, "Well, preacher, I'm trying." This is about intimacy. See, don't tell me about how sincerely you are trying. Don't tell me about how disciplined you're trying to be. Don't tell me about, "While I'm reading the Bible more." Don't tell me. While I'm spending more time in prayer. Don't tell me that. Tell me about, "Oh, Jesus is embracing me. I'm embracing him. He's becoming real in my life. Oh, I'm knowing him more than I ever have before." Now, maybe that comes through Bible reading. Maybe that comes through prayer for you. Praise God. But it isn't on what you are doing. It's on the embrace of his person. Tell me about the reality of who he is in your life and how you're just so close to him. So he says, you're walking up this road. This is where you're going. It's the moral system you're trying to achieve. You look out of your eyeball. You see your brother. You judge him. Where did that come from? You're on this road trying to achieve. I'm giving you the opposite of that. He says you end up becoming a jerk. Why? Because you got this railroad tie in your eyeball and trying to take a splinter out of your brother, because that's what you do when you judge. And he says the conclusion of that is you literally become a pack of dogs and you become a herd of swine. By the way, I'm not against dogs. The word there is scavenger dogs. They are packs of dogs that lived off of, well, the hill of Golgotha. Crucifixions. Dead bodies. That's this group he's talking about. And he says, in this judging, what happens is your church literally ends up being a pack of scavenger dogs and a herd of swine that are trampling the kingdom underfoot. Jesus, don't let me be that way. I'm not asking you today to take away my critical spirit. I'm not asking you today to take away my judging. I'm not asking you to get me under control so I'm not as hard on others. I'm not asking you to take away my negativity. so that when I look at people, I don't see what's negative, I see what's positive. I'm asking you to bring me in such an intimacy with you that those things don't happen in my life. I'm asking you to let me know you so well. I'm asking you to break down every wall in my life. And let me be in such an embrace with you and to know you so intimately that my nature is to think the best. My nature is to be positive. My nature is to support. Don't let us be a church that tears down. Don't let us be a little elite group that has real narrow doors where only certain people can get through and feel comfortable with us. Let us be a church that's absolutely focused on you. And in lifting you up, all people are drawn to you. Heads are bowed. The issue's not judging. The issue's not critical spirit. You got a railroad tie in your eye. It's not the issue. The issue is your embrace of Him. See, all of those things bespeak a missing of the point. Would you go after Him today in your life? Could I take you by the hand? And could we walk together into His intimacy? Whereby all these things would be added unto us. Could we seek Him first? Could everything else become subordinate? And in the wonder of His person, could we become the light on the hill instead of under a basket? Could we become the salt that has flavor? And instead of the tasteless that's thrown aside. Can't deal with you. That would be judging. Only looking at Him and knowing that He's drawing me to Himself. Want to join me in seeking Him? Our altar's open. Be obedient.